Hey everybody, welcome back to Stop Complaining, Work Harder. I'm Carey Davis with the Face for Radio from the Work Harder Studios right here in the vintage Airstream trailer. Hey, it's episode 10. What a milestone. It's a great way to start this series. It's going to go on for a lot longer than this because I still feel like I've got a lot more of my experience and a lot of my good friends' experience to let you hear, so that you don't make the same mistakes, or maybe you can mitigate out making the same mistakes that we have. I've lined up some great interviews coming up in the future, and we're going to try to do one of these shows a week. Try to get some good people out here, some high-level executives, also some first-line supervisors that can share their experiences. And I believe what you'll find is that the common experience is a lot more common in these professions than you think. I did this to help you, the supervisor out there, generally working for the government. If you're in private industry, hopefully it'll help you too. Management is its own skill. Like I keep saying, you can be an expert in whatever your profession is. You may be the greatest banker the world has ever seen, but when you have to start managing other bankers, you have to develop a whole new skill set, because supervision, management, and leadership are three separate things not related to your expertise in your chosen profession. And I learned that the hard way. I'm hoping to have you avoid some of those hard knocks that I learned in the school of reality. So let's get started. Today, I'm going to talk about something that most first-line supervisors, and frankly 13s, 14s, and some 15s have never heard of. It's called the Executive Core Qualifications. Why would a GS 12 or 13 first-line supervisor need to know about Executive Core Qualifications? That's a great question. Something I had no idea I needed to know about when I was working at that level. But then as I progressed, and it was really when I became a 15 and worked in Washington, and I started talking to these people, and I acted as a senior executive, that I realized they're the basic building blocks of management. There's the Office of Personnel and Management, OPM. If you work in the government, you'll hear about it. And they are the managers, and they determine how people get hired and fired. Basically, they're big HR for the government. And so in order to become a senior executive, you have to be able to show that you have done things in your career that fulfill these 5 executive core qualifications. And when you get hired, you're going to go through a series of interviews that are not like any other interviews you've done. There's entire schools dedicated to how to pass your SES interview and this kind of thing. I'm sure there's YouTube videos. I will not go into it. But a big part of that is they're going to ask you questions, and when you give answers, you're going to be rated based on how much your activities and your answers cover the executive core qualifications. Your resume for senior executive jobs are going to be based around how your life has hit these executive core qualifications. And then when they hire you, after all that, they hire you, then your resume has to go up to a board at OPM, a board of sitting senior executives, and they review your resume and your qualifications to ensure that you've actually hit your executive core qualifications in order for you to be certified as a senior executive. And it's a big, big, big deal to be certified as a senior executive. Not many government employees ever get that honor. So why does a GS 13 or 14 care? Why would you care? You're not a senior executive, but you might be someday. But moreover, if you're a 13, you want to become a 14. And if you're a 14, you probably want to be a 15. And it all starts at the top. So who hires that 15? A senior executive. And what's that senior executive looking for? The things that just became very important to them, which are the executive core qualifications. Why would a senior executive care if his 15 had executive core qualification experiences in his background? Because the senior executive needs that 15 to understand his job so that the 15 can perform at a level that helps the senior executive be successful. So now suddenly you've got a senior executive hiring a 15, he wants that 15 to have hit those ECQs, if not completely, pretty hard, and understand how to work towards them. Because all the way through a senior executive's career, believe it or not, you get rated. Your annual and midterm rating are based on those ECQs. So guess what I'm going to do as a senior executive, a smart senior executive anyway? I'm going to rate my 15s that work for me based on these ECQs. And I'm probably going to have a talk with those 15s that they need to be looking for those same qualities in their 14s, or assigning work to their 14s with those qualities in mind. So why would a 13 care? Well, a 13 should care because you should be building those experiences. A 14, a 15 should all be building those experiences. A great example is, why is it that most senior executives come from the ranks of government employees in Washington? You can become a senior executive not working in Washington. I did. I had a Washington experience, but I wasn't in Washington when I became a senior executive. But the vast majority of SES jobs, senior executive service jobs, get picked from the ranks of Washington, D.C. Why do you think that is? Why is it that when awards time, and I don't mean bonuses at the end of the year, I mean actual recognition awards come in Washington, D.C. for most federal agencies, they're focused on the Washington types instead of the field types. They actually, in CBP, they actually had to create special awards for field types just so the field would be included at some point, because most of the awards went to Washington types. Why is that? That's because in Washington, D.C., the mission is more, this sounds bad, but it's not meant to be, the mission is more bureaucratic. So by bureaucracy, I mean you're given a project, you're dealing with a group of people, you're dealing with very high-level things, and you're given a budget. So now that manager, maybe that 13 or that 14 manager, is managing maybe a working group of 20 people across the United States. The product they're going to put out is going to affect the entire country, possibly globally. And then they're doing so within a set budget number. And the budgets tend to be really impressive, in the millions or tens of millions of dollars when you get into these things. And then you bring outside help, contractors, all this. So as a 14 working in Washington, you have probably managed a project that hits many, if not all, of the ECQs. So the ECQs actually just changed in the last year, but the original ones are still very important because they give you a baseline. So I want to go through the 5 ECQs as they were for the last, 30-something years, maybe longer, so that you can and go through, what they are and what they meant. And then we'll talk about the new ones a little bit. I didn't work under them. They changed after I went on the deferred retirement program, but I think we can infer from them why and what's going on. So it's if you're watching this years in the future, it's 2025 now. The Trump administration's been in office for about 11 months. So that's just setting the stage. So ECQs, probably since the 1970s or 60s, have been these 5. Leading people, leading change, business acumen, results driven, and building coalitions. Now, excuse me one second. I'm going to sneeze. Okay, it passed for now. I'm sure it'll wait. Okay, I'm not editing these videos, by the way. You'll see production qualities are what they are, and I'm giving you these videos raw. I want you to see mistakes. I want you to see how a regular person talks. That's why we go through these things. So let's talk about leading people. We've been talking about that for the last 9, now 10 episodes. And of course, it's going to be a huge topic. You have to be able to show that you led people. Now, if you work in an environment that is about statistics or budget, you may have a tough time saying you led people. You can figure it out. If you have a team of 5 people, then you led those 5 people. That's great. But if you're just given a project and it's you, leading people may be tough. Otherwise, you should put together a working group, a team, some way to get people in the same room, give work assignments, give direction, give, a due date and a goal and the parameters for the goal, and then expect results. So that's leading people. Leading change, the government's all about change, and it's not all about change. No one hates change more than the government, particularly if it affects someone's nice, comfortable life. People get used to doing what they're doing, and then the new boss comes in and your ECQ says, I got to lead change, so I'm going to change your mess. We're going to shift and shuffle up the whole way we do business. It's a tough process because 80% of your employees will not embrace your ideas on change. And we can have a whole, probably 5-part series on what it takes to lead change. I know I've done it and I've been successful, but I've also done it, and most of the time I've tried to lead change, I fail. And the actual measure of how well you led change is not the change what it looks like when you're leading it. The measure of change is what the office looks like after you've left. I've got an old saying, water always goes back to level, right? You can hold that cup up, but as soon as you turn it, that water's going to go back to level. It's going to fall out of the cup, hit the ground, and become level. So my best example is CBP International Affairs. I was given the mandate to go and make certain changes. I went in, I did, and everything was fine. And then one day my detail ended, and I came back to Atlanta as the port director. And the day I left, they took everything I had done and just reversed it and went right back to day Carey -1 before I got there, which is fine. They're a great operation. That's been almost 10 years ago, so it's probably changed quite a bit since then. But that's what happened, and I watched it. There's no reason to get upset. It just means I didn't do my job well enough. It happens. You know, most successes have failed many times before they get to where they need to be. So I don't feel bad about it because I know we had a well-run operation while I was there. I know it was well-run after I left, but just they didn't pick up on the changes I was laying down, and it just didn't stick. That's how it works. So, you know, I tell you this story because someday you're going to apply for an SES job, and you have to be able to tell that story about how you led change and were successful in it. Don't talk about failures when you're doing these SES interviews. Very important. Anyways, that's leading change. It's very self-evident what it means. Here's a good one. Business acumen. What the hell does business acumen mean? No one knows. It's never truly been defined. A lot of times, the agency itself will know that there's no real business acumen component or a very minor business acumen component, and they simply won't ask those questions and it won't be scored. Many times it is, though, so you better be prepared to be able to talk about how you negotiated things, how you managed the budget. And numbers always work, because numbers are a clear source of success. I saved X percentage of dollars over year to year over the next 5 years. I created X amount of monetary inflow. I increased the number of applicants for grants by actual numbers, statistics you can lay down and can be verified. This shows a business acumen. We did this, we created this situation in order to increase productivity here, and that increased productivity resulted in X number of people or X number of dollars or the result we wanted, and here's how we can quantify it. To me, that's business acumen. If you've got different ideas on what big business acumen means, doesn't matter anymore because it's no longer an ECQ, but in my mind it's still very important for a manager to think of. But if you want to talk about it or debate it or have some ideas, send me an email. You'll get the email address at the end of the show. So the next one is results driven. And I always like to talk about results driven because it's the least most common type of employee in the government. Because what happens is most people are normal human beings, and then you get hired by the government and you are nurtured in your time in the government to ensure that the process is more important than the result. Following the process, follow the checklist, do things the right way, don't go outside the lines. Make sure that if you're going to, say, discipline an employee, make sure the first person you talk to isn't the employee, it's HR. Or whatever your agency's policy is. You got to go to HR, and then you have to go to counsel, and then you have to do this and this and this and this. And then, like I said about discipline, if you don't do it quickly, the discipline has no effect. Well, generally, if you follow government procedures, you won't follow through with your discipline in a timely manner, and you're just wasting your time, which is why so many managers don't do discipline. But, the trick to bureaucracy is swimming through it. But the point of all that is most government employees, particularly government managers, are not results driven. They are process driven. The process becomes the focus. Results driven are people that see an objective and want to get there, and how we get there doesn't matter. Now, most of the time, following the process to get the results, as long as you get the results, follow the process if that'll get you there faster. But as a manager, sometimes you got to look and call an audible and say, hey, I'm not following the process. I've got to get to my goal. I've got to get results out of this. The way you show that is the quantification. My results were X number of things better than we did last year. That's where your results driven is really going to show, is in the quantification. And then finally, building coalitions is exactly what it sounded like. I was working at Customs, and I went to Coast Guard, and I went to the Navy, and I went to the cruise line industry, and I got all these people in a room, and we all agreed that we would work towards a common goal and meet every other month until we achieved our goals, our results that we were looking for. I built a coalition of people towards a goal, towards a result. And what you can do is, as you report these things, you try to roll in as many of the ECQs as possible. And so the ECQs have changed. I just found this the other day, but the Trump administration has come in and they've changed them to more reflect, I guess, what the administration is looking for in government leaders. And I don't blame them. These are great ECQs. It's going to change the way that you look at the job, or not that you look at the job, that you report on your activities, if you're reporting ECQs. But remember, at the 13 level, you're there to support your 14s. The 14s there to support the 15s, and the 15s focus is making sure the senior executive gets what they need in order to run the agency. It all works in a line. That's chain of command in the civil service. And if you're not thinking that way, that's a whole episode maybe we've got to have. You got to figure that out. It's something I really learned in Washington, because in the field, you kind of have a job. And my job is to, I'm a first-line supervisor in the field, and my job is to make sure that when people come to the United States, their passports get checked and their luggage gets checked, and no bad guys or no bad things get through us. Simple. But that's not really true. You're a component in what the executive director for admissibility and passenger programs is looking for, to be able to report to the commissioner or the assistant commissioner, so that they, when they have to go in front of Congress or the secretary, can report that everything's running fine at the ports of entry around the country. You just don't realize it because you're kind of down the chain. But when you're in Washington, everything Blue Customs does is to support the work of the executive assistant commissioner, so that the EAC can then come and help us get what we need to continue the mission. It sounds convoluted, but that's how the chain of command works. So if you're working towards the ECQs, you're working for your senior executive, which is what you need to be doing, what you need to be cognizant of. So let's talk about the new ECQs. And I had to write them down. Okay, the first one, and this is a big one, I think, for everyone, that's commitment to the rule of law and the principles of the American founding. And you think, well, of course we are. We're all U.S. citizens. We're loyal. We've got security clearances. We work for the government. Of course, we have a commitment to the rule of law. Well, without getting political, I think, in the last few years, there's been some issues with that. Probably for longer than that, they just rose to the surface. So, and you can say, well, it's this side's fault and this side's fault. I'm not getting involved in that. Doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is I see civil servants picking sides politically. And that's a no-no. That's a no-no. Your oath was to the Constitution, not to a political party, not to a person, not to a group. The Constitution. That's the oath we all took. So if you're working to protect and defend the Constitution, you don't care if the president is from a certain political party or whether you like what they have to say or not. You're there to protect and defend the Constitution. And the Constitution is the basis of the rule of law. So if you have a commitment to the rule of law, you have a commitment to the Constitution, and that's where your oath went, and you better damn well follow it. I've got no use for anyone who's not protecting and defending the Constitution. and nor should anyone else in government. If you're a senior executive and you're allowing these kind of shenanigans to go into your office, you're just as guilty as they are. And I don't care which side you're pulling for, it doesn't matter. You protect and defend the Constitution, not a political entity. That said, all of us who are career civil servants are working for non-career civil servants, and those are the political appointees, and their job is to support a political position. And they do have an agenda, and they're allowed to. And that becomes the dance you play. And, you know, one of the moments I remember having a conversation at some of the highest levels in customs with a political appointee, and they wanted a person excluded from the U.S., kept out of the U.S., and frankly, I would have loved to keep this person out, but there was no legal avenue to stop them from coming in at the time. And, you know, and their issue with this guy was he was giving speeches outside the country that conflicted with American values. I do not disagree with that. But I couldn't find that he called for violence or incited terrorism or anything like that. I couldn't find any evidence that showed that. And that would have been what I needed to keep him out of the country. So I went back to this person, and I'll never forget, I said, I don't think we can hit him on this charge because there's nothing there. And I'll never forget, this person who literally was at the highest political level in the civil service said, well, why not? And I said, well, the First Amendment? Just like that. And he went, oh. And then another senior executive came in, and this person asked that guy his opinion, and he said, yeah, there's freedom of expression issues there. So active applied Constitution, everybody. Active applied Constitution. And the principles of America's founding: free country, freedom of speech, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, principles of America's founding. What more can I say? How can you, if you're against this, you should not be in government service. Find another job. It's just that simple. That's not to be mean. That's not to be crossways or somehow try to start a political argument. It's just, if you're against the Constitution, you're in the wrong business. Go away. Okay, I'll leave that one alone. The next one is driving efficiency. Okay, so what we need there, and I'm sure if you go on OPM's website, they have some in detail definition of what efficiency means. But, you know, does that mean ensuring that you're a good steward of taxpayer money? Hey, I'm all about it. I'm all about it. And without getting political, my issue with that is DOJ came in and got rid of the least paid people, leaving the highest paid people, and didn't look at what really needed to be changed, which is the budgeting process. Anybody in Washington who's watching this now, you need to look at, not for any single agency, for the whole government. The way we do the budget is not designed to save money. One man's opinion, but I've been there and done that. So anybody that hears that, if you want to talk to me about it, send me an email. We'll have a nice conversation. And the next one is merit and competence. Now, I know it sounds strange, but there's a whole lot of people out there that are going to have an issue with a core qualification to be an executive as merit or competence. I don't know how. I don't understand that logic process. But there's people out there who think they don't need merit and don't have to be competent. And then they call you dirty names because you do. Nonetheless, this administration, you know, put it in writing. They put their money where their mouth is. So merit and competence, I don't think I have to explain any further than that. Now an ECQ. And then we got leading people, which is great. And the last one's achieving results, which is, you know, results driven. I don't think there's a lot of change there. So, you know, big changes. Big changes. Do I think that the next time there's a political change in the winds in Washington, D.C., another party comes in, this might change again? I think, yeah. I think the door's been open. They'll probably change it to what they want it to be. But I would say look at the old ones to guide how you do business, and then use the new ones to quantify what you've been doing. Because the old ones are just good standard management challenges. If you can do these things, you're doing fine. The new ones, you know, you look at them, they're good, solid foundations to have a senior executive who's going to follow the Constitution and the rule of law and be efficient about it. It's tough for me to argue this. Plus it probably will make the senior executive selection process a little more efficient because you have specific things you're looking for now since you get rated on these things. So that's my talk about the ECQs. Again, why is it important for a first line supervisor? You're going to need it someday. As you're building your resume, as you're going through your career, you need to be looking at these ECQs and giving yourself experiences that fulfill them, where you can describe what you've done within the ECQs. And frankly, if your performance evaluation includes ECQs, even at the 13, 14 level, that's going to give you a boost all the way down the line. Supervisors giving, when you're giving performance evaluations, if you're a second line supervisor or above, using the ECQs to rate your employees who are also supervisors, these are good. This is just a good, solid practice. Can't go wrong. So that said, that's today's episode. I want to close the show with Bullshit Bingo, where we talk about government words that civil servants have made up to sound smart when they're really not. So this is one that has kind of become universal in speech, although I still don't think people use it unless they're involved in these things in day-to-day conversation, and that is the phrase, reach out. I'm going to reach out to my friend at the Department of Commerce because I think they have ideas on this. I'm going to reach out to the guy across the street who sells hot dogs because I'm hungry and I really like them with kraut and mustard. So, does one sound reasonable and one doesn't? Yes, absolutely. That's because we're so used to hearing it in the work context and not the personal context. I would rather hear somebody say, hey, I'm going to pick up the phone and call my buddy over at Commerce and see if he can help me out with this situation, instead of, I'm going to reach out. To me, it's absurd. It's not the way the English language is spoken in the common vernacular. So again, phrases we made up to be something we're not. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And, we're going to do these weekly. So keep your eyes open. Please subscribe. Email me. Let me know what's going on. If you want to talk about something I've said or have a further discussion, tell me I'm a jerk. I'm good with all that. If you want to be on the show, like I said, shoot me a line. Email's below. And have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon.